Yeah, New York is bouncing back, so hopefully it will keep increasing in tourist activity and decreasing in any other issues that might have happened during COVID.
Well, we know one thing: cannabis is alive and well
in New York. Yeah, so let me kick things off, as I think we've got a good number dialing in already or zooming in already. And I'll just say a quick word about Bar Capital as well. So it's been a pleasure working with the 361 Group, and I think it's because Mark and I have the philosophy of educating communities, and so this partnership is very special because of the great community 361 firm has, and we've been opening up our community to join here. The structure of Bar Capital is focused on cannabis. Our purpose is to make cannabis as common and culturally accepted as aspirin or alcohol. And the reason the entities that have evolved around Bar Capital exist is to serve that purpose. So Bar Cap 420 or A420 is our content side where we'll be publishing, have published some podcasts, but we'll be publishing both written and video and audio materials. Alliance is a set of strategic relationships we formed, including that with 361 firm, to help facilitate and expand the strategic networks that exist to support cannabis companies and funds. BC Global is our advisory arm that helps execute business objectives that increase revenues for cannabis companies. And then Bar Capital is sort of the parent entity that helps to raise capital and give strategic advice to companies and funds. So we've evolved fast. We now have grown to 7 people, including a couple of interns. It has been a lot of fun so far, and it's only getting started. These events, I wanted to highlight the format change. Number one is that we're going to do an event every 2 weeks, which is a very intense schedule, but I want to thank Darla Bennett from our team because she has been producing these, as well as Inessa from the 361 team that you all know quite well. They've been working together to publish these, and we'll be doing another one on July 8th as well as July 22nd. They will come in series of 3. So this one is a kind of a high level overview of what's happening in various parts of the cannabis ecosystem, both domestically in the US and in Canada, as well as in places like Europe, Africa, potentially we'll get into discussion about South America, Australia, Asia. The reason we're doing series of 3 is we can deeper dive into those topics that come up in discussion with the audience and really get to learn more about a certain topic area, or start to see where the audience wants to take the conversation. The other format change is that one of the 3 series will be featuring women and minority speakers only, so we can increase our bench. We've had really good support and feedback from key folks that help us put these events together to have even more diversity. And so we'll make it a goal to do one of those 3 events to increase that network. And audience participation and panelist cross questioning are great. I see Jay Spall from Alt is on. I remember the last event we did, there was a great scientific discussion between himself and Ian Atkinson from Grow, and I learned a lot just kind of listening in. So those are also welcome. In terms of the format for today, I wanted to lay that out. We will do a very quick intro for the panelists. They will just mention kind of what their title and kind of involvement with the cannabis space is. The reason for that is we have recorded spotlight videos thanks to 361 firm's process. And so you can check those out. We will post a link of that to the chat. And so you'll be able to see a more detailed information about each of the speakers if you wish to. We will then kind of go into a opening discussion, just talking about each of the speakers will talk about their focus area for about 5 minutes and how their experiences have been in cannabis, what their outlook is for the future of their specific areas, or overview of how they feel the industry is evolving. That could include different geographies, different parts of the industry. And then that's when we open up the panel conversations. I'll ask a few questions. Jim Hawk, who's on the call, is welcome to ask a few questions. And Mark, you're always welcome to ask some questions. And then we'll, once the panelists have a kind of set of initial questions, we will then let the audience participate. You're welcome to put your questions in chat. We will try to address each of them as we go along. Some questions are great for the chat community and they're answered by the chat community. Others, if you want to bring up with the panelists, feel free to warehouse them there, and we'll try to go back and address those. So it's my pleasure to kind of kick this off. It is a very distinguished panel yet again. Just really enjoy having such great speakers involved with this process. I won't be following any set order. In general, we will cover different areas of topics and different speakers as we go along. We like to have a free form structure because it ends up having more creative conversations. So with that, I will kick it off with Susan Payne as one of our main panelists, who also helped with coming up with some of the material for this event. So Susan, if you could just give a very brief background on yourself, and then I'll kind of move along the panelists, and then we'll open up.
Yeah, hello. Hello, everybody. My name is Susan Payne. I'm the Chief Executive Officer and co-founder of Holistic Agricultural Investments Group. We focus in Africa, and we develop and revive disused and abused farms and grow various different kinds of crops across different countries in Africa. We're the new kid on the block when it comes to cannabis.
Thank you, Susan. Lisa, if you want to go next.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Lisa Morris. I wear many hats. I'm the president of Road Concierge, which is a travel company. I'm director of philanthropic services for the Force Family Office. I'm an advisor to iCar Industries and Peak Bank and many other things. But I'm here today simply as an LP in the cannabis space. I invest my own money into cannabis.
Thank you, Lisa. Andrea, if you want to go next.
Hi, I'm the founder and CEO of Sava. Sava is a lifestyle cannabis e-commerce and delivery platform that serves the larger Bay Area. Sava is 100% women founded and run. We're currently raising to expand throughout California. And in addition to running the company, I love to mentor other women in that space so that they can continue to have a place of entry, make sure there's minimal barriers to entry for them as well.
Thank you. And one thing I forgot to mention is if the speakers could also identify where they're located currently. So Susan is in the UK, correct?
Yes.
And Lisa is in kind of the New York City, Pennsylvania area, depending on the day, right? And then Andrew, you're in San Francisco, although you're visiting New York right now.
Yes, I'm in Tribeca at the moment, but my home and business is in the Bay Area.
Thank you. Annie, if you want to go next.
Sure. Hi, my name is Annie Davis, and I am dialing in here from Sonoma County, California. I'm the VP of Marketing for Flow Cannabis Co. We're one of the largest vertically integrated cannabis companies in California, and we represent legacy farmers from the Emerald Triangle region with our flagship brand, Flowcana. I've been working also as a strategy consultant in the cannabis industry for the last 3 years, and my background is in traditional CPG brand management.
Thank you, Annie. And Kara, last but not least, if you could give your quick background.
Hi, I'm Kara Crab-Burnham. I've been in the cannabis space since about 2009 here in Massachusetts. I'm currently what I would be doing if I wasn't here, I would be receiving inventory. Actually, today is the first day that our retail store is receiving actual cannabis products by the hundreds. So I'm unfortunately not counting in the vault today. I get to talk to you guys. But I've been working with cannabis startups since about 2014, and I'm the co-founder and director of education for Elevate Northeast, which is a female-founded nonprofit for the better of the cannabis industry.
Great, thank you. So a few people connected to female-focused initiatives, which is great to see. So let me start off by just giving each person a little, time to kind of speak a little more deeply about their involvement. And I'll frame it as this. Obviously, we've got a good amount of California representation, kind of East Coast representation. And then, Susan, you're our international panelist for the day, based in the UK, but focused on Africa, but from the US. So if we could kind of go in the same order, and you have about 5 minutes. We have this little bit of a special effects, I call it. If you do go well beyond the kind of allotted time, you may see my background turn to yellow, which is just an indication if you could kind of wrap up your commentary. But I've rarely had to use it. So I'll turn it over to Susan to just kind of do a deeper dive and speak to some of her points. And then we don't have slides for each of the speakers, but one of the speakers does. So I'll just ask if Inessa, you could kind of share a screen in the background, so when we and show the panelists. So when we do queue up for the slides, we can go through that. Please go ahead, Susan.
Okay. Well, first of all, Anand, I'm a Canadian Brit.
Oh, I apologize. I apologize.
And I was raised in Italy, so I'm kind of a mixed bag. But in any case, I wanted today to speak about Africa and the developing cannabis market there. It's a very exciting market for Africa, and yet only 8 countries out of 54 are now legally allowed to grow this crop. The 8 front runners in Africa are South Africa, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Uganda, Rwanda, Swaziland, Zambia, and Lesotho. And what we've seen is since 2017, real growth start, a real interest start in these markets. And the reason is threefold. The first is that, and I'm sure some of you have heard me say this before, certainly some of the 361 crowd, but employment is huge. Unemployment actually is enormous, and an enormous hurdle in Africa. There's a demographic time bomb ticking on the continent, and there's an obligation on the part of governments to create jobs for the 1.2 billion citizens of Africa. The average age being 20 years old compared to America's 38 and Japan's 46. So it's the world's youngest continent, but with a large unskilled labor force that is seeking employment. Hemp, CBD hemp offers one of these because it's an intensive crop. And that is one of the big tick boxes for this crop. And that's sounds like it's not so important to those that sit outside of the continent, but it's a massively valuable crop for these governments to consider. The second is the climate, and the climate plays to Africa's natural advantage because there's a high level of light in the form of sunshine. The heat units are consistent and strong. You're not paying to be indoors, you're paying to be outdoors. Actually, it's free and it's there, and it's ideal for cropping, year-round cropping, as a matter of fact, which is ideal for CBD hemp cultivation. The third is the economy. Africa needs to develop an export market. It needs to bring in hard foreign currency reserves to improve the lives of its citizens. These are largely developing economies. They need to break the cycle of borrowing and struggling to repay using devaluing currencies, often weak and devaluing currencies. So the key takeaway here is that CBD is, gosh, my screen just changed completely. Sorry, folks. Hold on. Hold on for 1 second. Oh, goodness. Why did my screen just change? I just got a completely blank screen. There we go. Thank you very much. So I just want to have the key takeaway basically is that this is a lucrative crop that is both economically and politically important to bolster GDP and provide this diverse employment and revenue stream in a hard currency. And South Africa, which is the most advanced CBD hemp industry on the continent, has determined that legalizing the industry over the next 3 years alone is worth 1.7 billion to the South African economy. So there are several reasons additional why we expect to see the growth of cannabis increase in Africa from the current low base. And a few of these I'll just gallop through. One of them is it's a vigorous plant. It's got a penetrating tap root, and the deep sandy soils in many regions in the southern cone are really well suited to the crop. The planting cycle starts in October, which is our summer, and it basically lasts for 110 to 120 days between October and February. in hot and dry soil, which basically favors fast and homogeneous germination. So that's also good. The growing technique is simple. It's very similar to tobacco husbandry, of which Southern Africa has a long history, and it has a huge amount of experience in cultivating tobacco. At one time, in fact, Southern Africa was the biggest exporter of tobacco and cigarettes in the world. It's a disease-tolerant crop. It's a crop that isn't water demanding, and though our farms have very large water resources nearby, like the Zambezi and the Limpopo, our farms reside very substantial water resources. There are not many cases of growers that can have the same luxury, and those growers can still manage to successfully grow this crop. It's a very versatile crop. It's got no less than 25,000 byproducts that can be made from it. The top third of the plant is prized for its medicinal qualities. We know that. The rest of the plant has uses for a whole series of different products. We've been approached with seed genetics to plant a tricrop, which gives flowers for oil, and then the seed for health foods and products, protein, skin disorders, fiber for textiles, shoes, building materials, tires, ropes. I mean, it really has a huge amount of benefits. So not only can it be used, for a surprising number of products, but its net environmental benefit is also impressive because it's a conditioner of soil and crop rotations. So it's less dependent on pesticides and herbicides. It provides soil biomass, feeding nutrients back into the ground. And its primary benefit is bioremediation, as it removes toxins from the soil. In Africa, and I'll just get to the bottom of this and finish off here. We have a couple of farms in 2 countries. Both have applied to grow hemp. One is in Mozambique and one is in Zambia. Zambia is much further ahead than Mozambique. We've just been granted a license, as a matter of fact. We're one of 6 farms that have been granted a license to grow hemp. That's very exciting. As a proof of concept, Zambia has now made a start. And these are early stages. We'll start very swiftly in the next few months, as a matter of fact. We think that other African nations are going to follow this, especially countries like Mozambique, where one of our other farms is based. Mozambique is one of the 5 poorest countries on the continent, and it ranks even near the bottom of the poorest nations in the world. It's ranked number 142 out of 167 in the poor nations of the world. In terms of markets, we see the main buyers of CBD hemp to be outside of Africa for the short term, but with the knowledge that this continent is in a period of real transition and transformation. It's got 1.4 trillion in consumer spending in 2020, which is higher than India. It's expected to grow to 2.5 trillion by 2030. There is a business revolution afoot on the continent, and is very real and very evident. As a place that is well versed in the medicinal uses of marijuana, we expect to see the offtake market emerge across Africa generally. But for now, the main driver is that it is competitive climatically, and it's a low-cost quality supplier. It's also a continent of entrepreneurs with a strong agricultural history, where 60% of Africa still continues to work in the agricultural sector. Our biggest challenge has been the challenge of educating African governments as to the positive attributes of hemp, which have often been completely confused with marijuana. Many policymakers have held the belief that legalizing hemp means they are legalizing marijuana. But common sense has prevailed with a fairly high level of education over the past 3 years. And while the sector becomes more widely accepted and supported, we're hopeful that DFIs with capital to deploy and investors will decide to take the risk and make an investment in the SMEs that are at the coalface of this new industry in Africa. The reason returns for patient capital in Africa, that is 7 to 10 years and over, are considerable. You get a very, very big bang for your buck on the continent, and the social impact is enormous. Don't hesitate to get in touch with me by LinkedIn if you have any further questions, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. And not only did I mess up your nationality, which I apologize for, but I also tried to share my screen during your presentation. That's why your screens went blank, just so you know. Just to
throw me.
Yeah, so that's two strikes on me. So I'm gonna share the panelist lineup just for the event banner, so everybody can kind of follow along as the speakers go. and I don't screw up any screen positioning going forward. Thank you. That was very informative, and we'll circle back with some Q&A on that front. Next up, Lisa, if you want to talk about your perspective as an investor and any other items you wanted to highlight.
Sure. Well, as I said, I'm from New York, but Amsterdam is the home of my heart. I have been investing in the cannabis space for many years. I was a believer in this space long before many institutional investors were willing to get involved. I have invested across all different sectors. Interestingly, Susan, you just mentioned Africa. I did my first cannabis investment into Africa this year. It was actually through a UK holding company called Eden Pharma, but the cultivation is in Uganda. So I'm really interested to see how that turns out. So far, it's been looking very good. But yeah, so I'm really just here to talk about the various forms of investment in this space. I think people sometimes think of cannabis investing as only something that touches the plant or cultivation or a dispensary. And there's really so many ways to get involved. There's data companies, there's lighting companies, there's real estate plays. So I just think that people really need to look at cannabis not simply as the flower, but for all of the different areas where you can invest. I personally usually invest directly, but I have invested through some funds, Merida, Bonaventure. I allow them to sort of look out for more of the data type companies that I don't really know how to diligence. And then I look at brands, I look at founders. There's many different ways I make my decisions when it comes to cannabis. But overall, I think it's a really exciting space. I think there's room to grow. The changes in recreational laws are going to be really, really interesting. I also think a lot of the lighting companies really need to be looked at again, not just from a cannabis grow perspective, but think about vertical farming and all sorts of different agriculture that's happening now on an ESG side where the lighting is still applicable. So I'm looking right now at a company called Foes, which is a lighting company. So there's many different ways to get involved in the space, and it's a pleasure to be here to talk about it. And that's all from me.
Thank you, Lisa, appreciate it. And then I'm going to queue up here slides for you, Andrea, so you can
Let me just see if I can share my own screen real quick.
go ahead.
If
Yep.
not,
I'll stop sharing mine, so in case it gets in the way of yours.
give me one moment. Okay, it is not allowing me to do that. It might be, I'm just concerned it'll be challenging to follow along, but let's do the best that we can.
Okay, so I'm sorry, were you able to share yours, or
hold
you want
on.
me to reshare mine?
It is giving me, do you want to, I just need to fix something.
Let me go ahead and share mine here, if you can see it.
Yep, absolutely. So, so again, I'm the founder of Sava. We are a highly curated lifestyle e-commerce and delivery platform that serves the larger Bay Area. I got into cannabis myself through a very, personal experience. I used to be a global development consultant, worked around the world, had a major injury in 2010, was told I would never work again and that I was going to be on disability for the rest of my life because I had a spine injury. Happened to cross paths with someone that was growing cannabis. They put me on a protocol, and in a month, I weaned off all of the pain medications that I had been on for years. So this is, before legalization, we're talking 2013. People knew legalization was going to come in California, but it was still ahead of that time. And, CBD was not in the common vernacular the way that it is now. And coming out of that experience, all I could think is, why didn't I come to cannabis sooner? How many other people are there out there like me? And so much of the excitement of cannabis emerging is trying to attract this new consumer, someone who is not already consuming cannabis. There's so much value in bringing other people into the market that are going to integrate cannabis into their day-to-day lives. So I used myself as a case study to see what prohibited me from thinking about it and then solving for all of those barriers to entry. And you can go to the next slide, Anand. For me, there was many issues that prohibited me connecting with cannabis. It was the lack of understanding, the lack of transparency of how products were grown and made. And then really what really prohibited me from taking cannabis seriously at that time was that none of the shopping experiences really spoke to me as a woman in her 30s that was looking for more of a sophisticated shopping experience. And having been confined to my home, recovering from my injury, delivery was really important to me. And you know, especially with COVID last year, we know e-commerce is only growing and growing. 87% of Americans start their shopping journey online. And so in looking at all the areas that, you know, were barriers to entry for me, really the nexus was having a more sophisticated shopping experience. And my belief that this is what is going to pull in this new consumer into cannabis and have them feel safe and develop a sense of trust that they can move into the market. So next slide, Anand. So the way I approached this was I wanted to significantly differentiate myself from any of the other commoditized services out there that were just focused on speed. So you see this, you know, both in California and beyond. There's a lot of, you know, let's get it the cheapest eighth possible and let's get it to you as quickly as possible. I believe that, and we've proved this concept, that this is ignoring the new consumer that wants to spend time understanding cannabis, that wants to be educated. So we have focused on building a shopping experience that's content driven, that is focused on a high touch end-to-end experience, both from navigating the site to also when you receive your delivery, it's in a beautifully packaged box. And we want to get away from the whole psychology of speed, which I believe translates into a speedy shopping experience as well. My platform and what I believe needs to happen as we continue to grow and what other retailers need to follow is that you want an experience where a consumer is spending more time and thus more dollars and really being able to connect with the product. This focus of many retailers on speed doesn't necessarily allow a consumer to really research what's going to work for them. And should a consumer just quickly go on and purchase something just to get something fast, the risk there is that someone may not be connecting, especially this newer consumer, and I'm talking older demographics that have the ability to spend more. You want to make sure this consumer is connecting to the right product, because everyone has had that bad edibles experience where you've tried something and you get too high. With the newer consumer, which we know has so much value, if they have that experience, they're going to be lost for a few different purchase cycles, and it's going to take a lot to bring them back in the market. So our shopping experience is designed to have people go through a quiz, guide them, educate them, show them who's making the product and connecting them to a founder's story, all to gain a sense of trust. And what we have found is that this has paid off in that our customers spend significantly more on their basket size, and then we're going after a specific consumer. So next slide, Anand. And I'm not going to go through all of my slides, but this is how I've chosen to differentiate my e-commerce experience, you know, separate from the brick and mortars, which have limitation and scope, and then specifically in contrast with a lot of the larger D2C platforms, which kind of just do this spray and pray approach. It's not about targeted demographics, and they don't have a specific product curation. So what we have done, again, is focus on an older demographic. The average purchaser age of a customer on Sava is 44, and then 70% of our customers are women. And this has translated into industry-leading cart sizes and retention rates. So next slide, Anand. So just a highlight of how this approach translates is 85% of our revenue is from repeat customers. And then we have an extremely high basket size that trends between 170 and 180. If you look at other retailers, specifically deliveries, you'll find that their basket sizes are under 100. And again, these large platforms are focused on speed, and then they have to just be, again, the spray and pray approach to just suck in as many consumers as possible, but there's limited brand loyalty. So said differently, part of what I've done is create a brand beyond just a service. And then this brand can flex in numerous different ways. And I believe that this type of experience that is more sophisticated, going after a more adult market, is the way to connect to a different type of growth than the people that have already been consuming cannabis and are already familiarized with it. So other things that we do to be part of to be a differentiator and leader in e-commerce in the market is leveraging our data. And you can go to the next slide, Anand. So we all know data is really critical. And the data that we are receiving is, again, older, from people that are purchasing more and that are going towards a different type of product. So the categories that do well on our type of platform are very different than other delivery and retailers. Vapes are one of our lowest selling categories, whereas drinks and edibles have been our top selling categories for a significant amount of time. So we dig into that, we leverage our data to share that with brands so they can help develop their products to our type of demographic. And then we're also able to leverage our unique data for additional product development ourselves, which is part of flexing the brand of Sava. We're not just the proprietary technology, we're a brand, and that brand can also move into products. So we have taken that first step, last slide, in that we partnered with Cann, which many people hopefully are familiar with on this call. They're a thought leader in the drink space. We did a co-branded product with them. There's some extra data that I don't need to go into on this slide, but this is the beginning of doing deeper partnerships with our existing brands. We're not going to move our brands out. We endeavor to be the best retail partner to the best brands in the space, but we do know how to market to our specific demographic. And so this was our first foray. We've queued up a couple more co-branded products with key brand partners, and then we're just going to go deeper into those relationships, which we're really excited about. And then I don't know if we want to go into the raise slide, Anand, but I am currently raising growth capital. We have, penetrated a certain amount in the Bay Area. We did become cash flow positive last year. There are many deliveries that have not been able to achieve this, and we have done it on a real shoestring budget. 2.3 raised in the lifetime of our company to get to cash flow positive is a significant achievement. And we are raising to move into more markets, as well as to bring more differentiated co-branded products to market. Something else that I'll say about Sava, I think I'm nearing time, is that we are 100% women founded and owned. We're also LGBTQ and Latinx owned. We have had a mandate since our beginning that 50% of the brands on Sava are women owned. We expanded that mandate, that 20% are BIPOC owned. And we have found that these values really resonate with our consumers and is a huge part of the stickiness. So it might sound trite to say authenticity is still a key ingredient to success, but we have found that to be true because it's who we are. The brands that are on Sava are the brands I want to consume, the brands I want to shop. And so we're bringing our authentic viewpoint as women that integrate cannabis into our day-to-day lives, into our specific curation thesis. happy to go into any more detail later, but this is what I see is going to be important for the California market overall, to reach these new consumers. And again, I think a fallacy many people had was that when legalization happened, it's like turning on a light switch and all these new people are going to flood the market. Some did, but there are many people that will still be coming in. They just need a little bit of hand-holding. How do we get them there? And that might mean that my customer service person spends an hour on the phone with an older adult, you know, in her early 70s. But the benefit of that is that customer is going to be loyal to me and come back time and time again. So you need to have a different approach to bring in this newer market. This newer market is, again, they're spending more, they're older, and they're going to be key to growing the market overall. So happy to answer any more questions, and thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Appreciate it. And then next up, we have Annie Davis. If you want to try to share your screen, I will stop sharing mine. And you should not need permission, but if you have...
All right, I'm going to try. So let's see. Yeah, that worked?
Yep.
My screen. Okay, great. Okay, well, a couple things just before I kick off and dive into the company I work for. So I mentioned earlier, my name's Annie. I've been working in the cannabis industry for several years. I noticed on the intro slide with the bios that in addition to my work, 360 also included my status as a canna mom. So I am the mom of 2 young children, and that is part of my journey into cannabis. And in relation to kind of what Andrea was talking about in terms of Sava, and just the opportunity in terms of market education, for me, becoming a mom was part of my personal journey in that I had been a cannabis consumer myself for a number of years. It was always something that I was somewhat closeted about. I would actually say very closeted about, especially like as a student at Harvard Business School and in my professional life. And in becoming a mom, after I had my first child, I suffered from some pretty severe postpartum anxiety. And I had stopped my cannabis consumption during pregnancy because there was a lack of research around how cannabis would impact a growing fetus. And I wasn't convinced that it wouldn't harm my baby. But postpartum, I started consuming cannabis again, and it massively, massively improved my mental health and was a huge, huge support to me in just navigating the 4th trimester postpartum. And I just began to get really passionate about the potential for cannabis as a plant to support women, to support moms, and just like the just what I could do personally and professionally to break the stigma. And I want to put in a plug as well for Sava, because as a woman who kind of fits their target consumer who lives in the Bay Area, I will say that the way that Sava has built their platform, the way they've branded their platform, and the curation of products and experiences is something that I think there's a huge opportunity for and a need for in terms of not only having branded products that speak to a diverse range of consumers, but also having the retail experience and the delivery mechanism be something that speaks to consumers. So talk to Andrea if you're looking for more investment opportunity, because I definitely think that they're onto something at Sava. But I'm here to talk a little bit about California cannabis. So I live in Sonoma County. I live in the middle of wine country. I'm actually originally from the Boston area, from Massachusetts, but I've been out here for 14 years. And in addition to the impact that cannabis had on me personally and my belief in it as a medicine, I also entered this industry because I saw massive potential for the region in which I live and the area in which I live here in Northern California to benefit economically from the growth of the cannabis industry. And, you know, cannabis has been grown in Northern California in this area called the Emerald Triangle, which is 3 counties that are Mendocino County, Humboldt County, and Trinity County for the last 50 years. The climate of this region, due to It's mild evenings, it's cool evenings, it's hot days. And the altitude of this region that resembles the Kush Mountains in Asia are one of the reasons why the cannabis plant has thrived in Northern California, and are similar reasons to why grapes thrive in this region. So just as Susan was talking about in terms of some of the environmental conditions that make these cultivations in Africa ideal opportunities and places for this plant to grow, so is California. But to date, we've been limited in terms of how consumers can access California cannabis due to our current regulatory framework and regulatory environment. But we at Flow Cannabis Co., which is the company that I work for, we are building a supply chain infrastructure here in Northern California, based in Mendocino County, to prime California, to prime this region to be able to export the best cannabis that's grown in this region outdoors, sustainably, under the sun, to the rest of the country when interstate commerce opens up, as well as when hopefully federal legalization takes place. We started, actually the company was founded in 2015, but from about 2015 to 2019, we built the foundation of our company. We, over the years 2018, 2019, 2020, our flagship brand, Flowcana, was the #1 flower brand in California. Over the last couple of years, we have been building the floors, and we're building the infrastructure for our company to expand beyond just one brand into a house of brands. We are building a supply chain infrastructure that includes sourcing, so scalable inventories of flower, trim, bulk oil products, the ability to process, produce, and distribute not only through California, but throughout the country. And so the network that we are building with Flow Cannabis Co. is a network of independent farmers who grow in use organic practices and grow in small batches. And we are creating a platform that enables these farmers to scale and kind of collaborate as a collective to market their flower and to kind of brand this region in the same way that Napa Valley has been branded as a hub of high quality wine. It is our goal to support the independent farmers of the Emerald Triangle in branding this region as the Napa Valley of weed. So with COVID, and so to that end, we've been adding our own cultivation in addition to the farmer network with whom we work. And we're building out our distribution network currently to be able to again, export out of California. We see an opportunity as well to, similar to what Sava described in terms of delivering branded and white label products in a range of high value categories across flower, extracts, edibles, topicals. And we work with a variety of brands to private label and co-pack their products, and we're currently doing in discussions with a number of MSOs as well, who seek to position themselves to be able to access California flower when interstate commerce opens up. We're not just a products company, and I think this is kind of one of the exciting opportunities and areas that things that I'm really interested in and excited about from an investment perspective is the opportunity for destination marketing and cannabis tourism. So in addition to our 3 brands within our house of brands, Flowcana, Caldera, and Roots, we also have a number of venues that we own. Flow Ranch is our hospitality center that we are building up in Mendocino County at our headquarters at the Flow Cannabis Institute, where we will be able to host guests and take them on tours of farms throughout the Emerald Triangle, as well as walk them through the production processes and show them the trimming and extraction, et cetera, how everything goes from being a plant to a finished product. We also have acquired a facility in Mendocino County called the Solar Living Center, and we will in early 22 begin fundraising to build out this facility to become a hub of cannabis tourism with a museum on the history of cannabis. It will have a retail license and be able to sell cannabis product, and guests will be able to book stays in a number of residences on the property. So they'll be able to come from hopefully around the world to experience the best of California cannabis on site here in Mendocino County. And then we've got as well a number of media assets in the form of films, events, talks, and online sessions. And so we're really seeking to kind of create this destination of the Emerald Triangle as a place where consumers from around the world can come to learn about the history of cannabis, to taste kind of some of the original or some of the earliest kind of strains of cannabis where they're kind of natively grown and grown best, but then really positioning ourselves in terms of the supply chain infrastructure to be able to export these brands throughout the country. And you know, at the end of the day, we really see California is the agricultural hub of the United States. And you know, because of the way that this cannabis industry has grown or is growing in a state by state regulatory framework, the agricultural kind of supply chain of cannabis looks nothing like that of other industries. You know, we grow, you know, the majority of our strawberries in California, our tomatoes in California, lettuce in California. We're not growing it indoors, inside warehouses with grow lights and you know, air conditioning units running. That's not how we grow the majority of our produce in this country. And we at Flow Cannabis Co. believe that as the cannabis industry matures, is much more likely to mirror these other agricultural commodities, which are grown in these areas that have lower costs and better climates. So yeah, that's an overview of kind of where our company sits in the kind of investment landscape. And then, as I mentioned earlier, I also have a background in CPG marketing, and kind of my kind of background prior to cannabis is all about in terms of consumer branding and marketing.
Thank you, Annie. Appreciate it. And next up, we have Kara, if you want to go ahead and speak.
I don't have slides, I'm sorry.
No worries. I'm going to put your bio page up instead, so no worries.
Perfect. So hey, yeah, I've been in the cannabis space for a long time. I got started back with Students for Sensible Drug Policy in college, and went to the Massachusetts Cannabis Reform Coalition, which runs the Freedom Rally, which is one of the largest cannabis outdoor freedom of speech, or how what's the term, is pro-potestival in the country. And then I started in 2014, I started working with someone named Mickey Martin, originally out from California, who had come to the East Coast to invest in a cannabis workforce training program. And so I became the administrator, the dean, and the marketing person, and the janitor, and the curriculum developer, and at times an instructor. And I discovered that I just really love startup life, and I love the cannabis space. So I stuck through it. Getting the school up and running, which ran for about 3.5 years, and we trained probably 600 people who work throughout the industry across the country at this point. And in 2017, I co-founded Elevate Northeast with Beth Waterfall Creative, and Tashonda Vincent Lee. And we have worked very hard to create a space that is welcoming, diverse, knowledgeable, trustworthy, useful to companies in and around Massachusetts. And we most recently, last October, we initiated a program with Holyoke Community College. So now we're teaching workforce training programs ongoing through the college. And we launched a scholarship fund just this spring. So this is our first, as a nonprofit, this is our first big push to raise money to fill that scholarship fund, which I'm pretty excited about. It's slow going, to be honest. I've never had the opportunity or the need to raise money before. And it's definitely not as easy as some of you guys make it look and sound. But I'm really excited to have the opportunity to pull funds together and help people become better stewards of the industry and the product and our businesses. So as far as, you know, the market, I'm obviously going to be most familiar with Massachusetts. I've exclusively worked here. And I would say from what I've seen over the last 10 years or so is that it's the education that's going to be the real game changer for our industry. And I don't just mean that as in workforce training and training our staffs to really understand how do you explain the endocannabinoid system? How do you explain that, you know, this is touching every part of your body? How do you explain that one strain is going to work complete? I don't even like the word strain, but one varietal or one cultivar is going to work completely differently based on the physiology of the person who's consuming it. And, you know, and something Susan had said earlier, she pointed out that hemp and cannabis are different, and that's really a legal distinction, because cannabis and hemp essentially are the same plant, but one is distinguished as having less than 0.3% THC, and therefore it becomes hemp. But all of these plants can be grown essentially the same way, and you can be looking for the same results from them. So, you know, I think that training and educating the consumer and the globe about it, you know, as we're listening to Annie talk so freely about like wine and grapes and how we understand these different regions, like you say that to someone who's not familiar with the cannabis space and they're so confused. They have no idea what we're talking about, but you could talk about a Sonoma Valley wine with anybody pretty much in the world, or you could talk about, you know, German beer with pretty much anybody in the world, and they're going to have a baseline understanding of hops and grapes and fermentation. And then you try to talk to somebody about, you know, THCA crystals and Turk sauce, and it's you're not going to get too far unless they're really well educated. So you know, really talking about this, making this a household conversation has got to be, and it's still our first step. I mean, if we're looking at the cannabis industry as a staircase, like we're still on that first step, trying to get so many people that are unfamiliar because of prohibition, which is mostly the United States fault, around the world, and, you know, trying to get this all, you know, get everyone on the same page. It's a real challenge. But it comes back to haunt us when we're thinking about our staff working at a cash register, and someone comes in and they have a question, and the staff, I heard this recently, a staff member said, oh, well, you want the bud to still be wet when you buy it. That's how you know it's good. I was like panicking. I was like, this is the information going out to the general consumer that it can't explain these things. I was like, oh my God, stop. So, you know, these are really important factors that go into the customer experience. And if you give somebody especially if they're looking for medical usage, and you give them the wrong product type, they may never try again. They may be like, this is bunk, this is hocus pocus, it's not real, or had a terrible experience where it inflamed everything that they were trying to alleviate. But, you know, that's going to all be part of growing this industry on a global scale, and having these conversations and getting the lay people that are not interested, particularly interested, to have a basic understanding and knowledge. I think that also, as a factor of prohibition, anyone involved in the cannabis industry has to take a serious look at themselves and say, okay, well, now I'm an activist. Because I feel that after, and I'm not alone on this, but I feel that after the decades of prohibition that we've been put through, and the disproportionate harm that the war on drugs has caused to minorities and communities of color, and honestly, poor communities, or where you see a lot of inequity and you see a lot of injustice, and how we see a lot of people who have been wealthy or come from wealth are able to jump into this space and grow that. And, you know, I want everyone to do, you know, to do that and make money and continue to grow your wealth. Don't let me suggest I want you to stop. But you know, it's so important that when we have that opportunity to participate, that we're giving back, we're making corrections for with the opportunities that we're allotted. And, you know, that could be, you know, giving to the right funds or participating in equity. In Massachusetts, every time we have an application, you have to create a positive impact plan that accompanies your application to operate. And therefore, we have a very strict plan that has, you know, achievable goals that say we're going to do this in order to better the community. One of the things I always like to keep in my impact plan is that we want to keep some of our inventory reserved just for SE and EE applicants on the wholesale market. So right now, it's very difficult to get marijuana in Massachusetts. It's a roller coaster of whether or not there's flower available for all the retailers and all the delivery companies. But, you know, one of the things I'm going to do when we have flower ready is certain percentage of that is reserved just for the delivery companies. Like, I just want to make sure that they have access to product without being, you know, extorted. It's an awful word. But there's a lot of stuff that happens in the wholesale market that is pushy and aggressive, and that will be difficult for companies that are operating on a very short, you know, shoestring budget to have access to the market that they deserve and they should have access to. And then I guess like the last greatest challenge I see for us as a whole is 280E, which I know somebody have already mentioned. I'm not a CPA, will not attempt to explain it, but I know that it's bad for us and that we end up paying a lot more taxes than we really should have to. So yeah, overall, I think that moving forward, we have a ton of opportunity, that there is a ton of money that is going to pour into this industry. It's going to continue to pour into this industry. And I believe that if we're all really focused on doing good by the industry and our employees and our customers and the communities that we operate in, and those that have been previously disproportionately harmed, I believe that we will be the best industry of all industries on the planet.
Thank you, Kara. Appreciate that, and appreciate all the panelists giving us more depth. You know, it always strikes me, and it shouldn't, because most people involved in the cannabis space right now, whether they're operators or investors or have helped push the regulatory boundaries to where they are now and pushing it beyond, many of them have personal stories of how the industry has had an impact on their lives. So always appreciate people sharing that. There's a lot of directions we can go, so I'm just going to set the stage on a few items. And by the way, we are prepping to do an educational series for 3 parts on sort of what is the cannabis plant and how to understand its components. What are some of the regulations that differentiate CBD production versus other cannabinoids that are psychotropic, like THC. You know, hemp extracted into CBD in the US has to have less than 0.03% THC content. That's the cutoff, but it could be different in other countries. So there are differences in some of the regulatory landscape. And then what are the health impacts of cannabis? We will be doing a series on that, so you can understand, depending on how you consume it, what the health impacts might be. Flower may be more harmful to your health than taking a liquid form, for example. So on the themes, you know, I'll start off with the personal kind of angle and the consumer. One of the fears that I completely share, that Andrea brought up, is that people consume cannabis in a form that is legacy, which is all about kind of the drug culture that we all have been programmed to see it as. You know, many of us may have tried it in undergrad, and you know, it was cool and illegal, and you know, you put it into brownies and you smoke a joint and all those things. That is fast changing, and that is not going to be necessarily the, you know, format for interacting with the cannabis industry for consumers into the future. There are younger people which will dominate consumption from this industry that don't have those conceptions of you have to have it in a bong format, right? They're not going to be exposed to just that, because they're going to grow up in places where they can get it legally, and they can get it from everything between flour to tinctures to oils, so you name it, sublinguals, beverage, and the experiences are going to be different in a number of ways. The genetic makeup of the person, the sex, the weight, those things could have an impact. But also just the different strains and the different cannabinoids that are in the product are going to shape that. And so collecting data on how people are interacting and why they're using it, I think, is a key area. It ties into what Susan started off talking about, which is the Africa opportunity. So Susan, I'll ask you to kind of talk about a nascent market at first, and the CBD space. Let's focus on that, since that's the opportunity in Africa right now. What are you seeing in terms of the attitude and level of education or understanding that governments might have in approving some of these cultivation licenses, and what are they thinking through medicinal applications, for example, and opening up domestic demand, and not just making Africa, a production, agricultural kind of production zone to then export to other countries, but really also focusing on the opportunity that you've outlined that exists already in the continent itself.
Yeah, thanks, Anand. Basically, I think, and we've heard this countless times today, in fact, the biggest hurdle is in the education of everyone. It's not just down to governments on the ground in Africa, but there seems to be quite a wide gap, certainly outside of America, on what is understood to be important, and what is cannabis and what is not, what is psychedelic and what is not. I mean, it sounds ludicrous, and as Kara just said, THC of 0.3% and under is acceptable in Africa, but that is not acceptable in Europe, where it's 0.2%. So you've got even different challenges with different continents. But we are seeing that most of the demand is going to be for oil. Certainly, I guess medicinal purposes is what is being sought, and I think that Africa has a way of leapfrogging. So you think that it's going to lag endlessly, and then something happens, either in the film industry or the music industry in Nigeria, but there's something that actually pushes, escalates, catalyzes a country to really thrust forward. And I think that we're going to see a couple of these countries in Africa look at the medicinal side of CBD and really push forward. The biggest issue for us is the buyers. With the glut in America right now, who is going to buy this? And that's why I alluded slightly to this gargantuan market in Africa and the importance of bringing on the population to understand the benefits of CBD, because when it does, there is a huge, huge consuming market in Africa. But in the meantime, we have to start with the market, and the market is where the buyers.
Thank you. And so I'll just share a screen that I saw posting on this on LinkedIn by somebody in my network. And, note that things like this happen and they have an impact on kind of social perception. If Martha Stewart shows up next to Snoop and promotes a lighter, it goes well beyond and kind of shows how corporate America is starting to take note, even if they're not directly involved. I won't comment on what I think about this as a perception of the cannabis industry, but maybe some of the panelists would like to. But it goes in these, in the U.S. certainly is built this way. There's a lot of resistance. There's a lot of skepticism. People aren't interested in what cannabis is. They have the old taboo kind of viewpoints on what it is. And then they just start seeing influencers changing their mind, and then the tipping point comes very quickly. So kind of changing geographical focus to California. And so this is for Andrea and Annie. What are some of the behavior and changes you've seen, whether, on the recreational side or medicinal side for your personal uses, in behavior from people in California over the last, and you both have been aware or involved with this industry for some time now. And for those who are newer to the cannabis space, it's in dog years. So every year you spend is like 4 in any other industry. So if you could comment on how the behavior has shifted in California, which has had this long-standing kind of medicinal and, kind of gray market usage, and then, it was legalized.
Annie, do you want to start?
I was gonna give you the chance to start. Go ahead.
Well, and on further direct me if my answer is not totally dialing in. But again, something I mentioned is just the purchasing behavior that we notice. So I believe that I'm seeing some of the trends a little bit earlier than other retailers. So, for me, flower is here to stay, but I remain unconvinced as to where vapes will land within different demographics. I think they'll be here, but like I said, I've seen vapes as a category continue to drop on my platform. Again, I'm going after an older demographic, a different demographic, a newer demographic. And what I've seen is edibles continue to rise, and we have seen drinks now break out of the pack in a very specific way. This is something that I believed was going to happen. So we went in hard on drinks on our menu around a year ago, and drinks now take up about 25% of my shelf space. So one, drinks are bulkier, so they're going to just take up more space by the nature of the packaging, and depending on like what sort of bottle size. But I believe drinks, I think it's a very exciting emerging component, and that we've just seen it completely take off. Then edibles, and then flower. Flower, like I said, I don't think flower is going to go anywhere. I think, and being that I am someone who believes in values-based shopping, I think companies like Flow Cannabis, like there's going to be a strong brand equity that continues, and that's the beauty of both my and Annie's companies being based in Northern California. There's always going to be specific appellation that we can leverage to build our brands that's, again, authentic. So I've seen some of those again, product categories shift, and so that's a lot of what I pay attention to. I look at, when we do this, not just what's selling today, but what the repeat purchase behavior is. This is something I'm always looking, like what's repeat purchase behavior 30, 60, 90 day, 120 days out, and evaluating that data. And based on what I'm seeing, drinks are just gonna continue to take a larger bite out of the market. And I think it's, for companies that are emerging into that drink space, the time is now to gain your foothold, because the big companies are watching and are gonna move in as soon as they can.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I would echo the same comments as Andrea in terms of like the growth of categories like edibles and beverages. But I'd also say that, we've seen a lot of growth in terms of like, I would lower dose, like micro dosed, 2 to 5 milligrams of THC content across edibles and beverages. I think there's a big opportunity in higher dosed edibles and beverages. One thing that we saw during COVID, while flower is still king, was that people had a little bit between the vape crisis and COVID, concerns about inhalable products. And even for consumers who are legacy consumers, for consumers who, have been, let's say, like smoking cannabis for decades, then open to trying these new categories, because these categories just didn't exist before. There weren't high dose beverages, there weren't high dose edibles. And you think about like someone who maybe like, kind of like has been a smoker for years, but now they're aging and they're maybe more concerned about their health and wellness than they were when they were in their 20s, and they're open to trying different product forms. And then prior to my current role, I was with Care by Design, which is one of the leading wellness brands in California. And I would say there's also a lot of growth within California in terms of products and brands that are focused on minor cannabinoids, cannabinoids beyond CBD and THC. And again, to Kara's point, like this involves like a high degree of consumer education, kind of formulations of terpenes and non-THC cannabinoids like CBN and CBG, which can be helpful for things like sleep or anxiety, but have been less studied and don't have that psychoactive effect. And so I think we're going to see a real big growth in this area. And I also think that these are areas where you're going to see traditional pharma and CPG companies coming in because they're going to not necessarily be regulated in the same way due to lack of THC.
I just wanted to piggyback. I'm so glad, Annie, that you mentioned the minor cannabinoids because I meant to do that. And the other one I'll throw out is THCV. I'm really seeing that one become increasingly popular. I know many flower companies are making sure to have products that include THCV. It helps, not just with focus, but can curb the munchies. So it's very attractive to certain demographics. I personally like THCV for focus in the morning on a low dose component. So I think as the science continues to evolve, these minor cannabinoids are going to continue to take a bigger chunk out of the market. And I love seeing the science also evolve with terpenes because there's so much we're still learning. And it's really, what is the terpene profile? We've moved so far beyond indica sativa hybrid, but again, I think Annie and I are seeing things specific to here. You go into Connecticut, now that I'm on the East Coast, I've been looking around and it's not there at all. You have like strain A, strain B, and you don't even know the name of strains, never mind what the terpene makeup. I mean, that's just like so far down the pipeline. And so that again is the opportunity. And I can tell, for myself, I track what I take very rigidly. Again, I came from a medical background and I know which terpenes that I want to have be predominant in any product that I'm taking. So I think I call it terpene forward products. I think we'll continue to see that.
Thank you. And so I'm going to open it up. I know a few people want to ask questions. So Jim, you've got your hand up, and then Kara, if you want to go after Jim, and then Lisa, you're an investor, as am I, in the space. So would love to get some questions from your angle as well. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so I have so many questions. There's just not enough time. So it's already been really, I think, fantastic. But specifically for some of the panelists, there's been this kind of recurring verbalized or ideological paradigm that we hear about in the cannabis markets, and particularly I think in California, related to strength and price being a proxy for quality or quality of experience, and maybe slightly detrimental to that concept of authenticity. And so Andrea, I think it's so cool that you're really championing customer intimacy as a way to offset some of that. And I'm just wondering whether you guys are seeing some erosion of that paradigm, so that, as we get farther along the terpene chain and we really start to focus on individualized effect from different kinds of strains and terpenes and product mixtures and things like that, the combination of education and technology, are you seeing that really? It sounds like you are, but I just wanted to ask each of you, and the difference between Massachusetts and California is interesting as well, but just wanted to see what your feedback was on some of that.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess just kind of tying together some of what I've said, and also, what Annie and Kara especially have mentioned, is I think as we educate the consumer, it's kind of like a call and response effect. An educated consumer knows how to ask different types of questions, which propels products maker forward. They become increasingly sophisticated, and thus you need to be addressing increasingly sophisticated questions. I think a sophisticated consumer is going to be looking more at the specific makeup of a product rather than just, how high am I going to get per dollar. Now, again, I am going after a very specific demographic. There is definitely populations that are going to be all about what is the cheapest I can get my high THC for. So that market's there. It's definitely a target for other types of retailers. It's just not what I go after because, again, it doesn't make sense for my unit economics and for the type of business model that I'm doing. So I think you'll always see a demographic that's looking for that. But I think as we become overall more sophisticated, people are gonna look differently at their product. You know, the same way I'm willing to pay, you know, a little bit more for my non-GMO, organic, free trade products. That's what I liken it to. And that's the type of shopper I am, and thus the shopping experience I'm bringing forward.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kara, you had a question as well.
So, to what Andrea was saying, I don't know what Connecticut is doing. It is ridiculous. Connecticut's medical program went like in its own direction with the no strain names, and everybody has to be a pharmacist. It was crazy. So yeah, I feel you on that. But you know, something that I wanted to ask Andrea and Annie, because you're both in like more established markets, obviously. This is something I have been asking manufacturers in Massachusetts to develop, which no one is making. And Annie was like, oh, more potency, like higher potency products, what people are looking for. And that's not me. I mean, maybe I'm the only one in the world, but I want to eat the whole candy bar. And I only want 15 milligrams of THC. And that is just not something we have here. Like, I'm mom life. Like, I want to sit there on the couch watching Lucifer and eat the whole candy bar. Like, getting a piece of candy that's this big is the most infuriating thing to me for someone who likes snacks. Is this going to like change? Do you see California or any of these other markets sort of like embracing like, I want my calories with a little THC?
I think, well, one of the biggest barriers here is really it's like a mindset amongst retailers and buyers where their goal is to get like the most THC like per square foot in their store. That's really how the majority of buyers in California are buying, which is interesting, which is actually one of the reasons that Can, which has like skyrocketed as a beverage, has had a lot of, they've initially had a really hard time selling in to, you know, retail buyers, because what they were offering was this, like, to Andrea's point, it's a drink, it's a can, a 6-pack takes up a bunch of shelf space, and then you're only getting like, you know, 8 milligrams total of THC, you know, per unit. So there's like a kind of antiquated viewpoint again amongst buyers, because they believe that the majority of cannabis, like all total cannabis consumers, are all seeking high THC. We're trying to maximize our THC per shelf space. And then then it puts like the onus on brands to really educate buyers and retailers that no, there's a range of consumers. There's all these different consumer archetypes. There's the, you know, 70-year-old retiree who like maybe tried weed, you know, 50 years ago, and now they want to like, you know, tiptoe back into it. There's the person who's going California sober and they're giving up alcohol, but they'll try their, you know, microdose beverage. But it's really an uphill battle for any brand that has a lower THC kind of content per unit. So I think it's kind of like, I believe we will see that in the market maturing, but I think it's also being a matter of honestly, like people getting in to run these retail operations who are more sophisticated and understand like that there are a range of shoppers, and not everybody wants to get like couch locked stoned and waste the rest of the day away.
So I'll make a quick comment and throw my dad under the bus. My father is an immigrant. You know, he fills everything to the brim to get the max value out of something because he had to struggle. And so if you give him a glass and you give him wine or scotch, he will fill it to the brim, and you know, not know, you know, the experience he's going to have is going to be wildly different because he doesn't drink that often. But that's the level of understanding people have about cannabis. It's like you were just mentioning, everybody thinks it's to get, you know, stoned and sit on your couch and eat munchy food. On the terpene and formulation side and the beverage side, I just wanted to loop in Jay, actually, because I see you're on, Jay, because we had the last session about the tech side of things, and bev tech was one of the conversation areas, as much of the crowd will remember. Jay, could you comment a little bit more about kind of the terpene profiles and the nuances around that, or a little bit more about how you think consumers are starting to change their preferences and what products they should really be able to access as a result of that.
Thanks, Anand. This has been great, by the way. Big ups to all the panelists. I enjoyed hearing all the women and everybody especially a lot. To the points you brought up, Anand, one of the things that I, in this conversation I noticed was we talked about the minor cannabinoids, terpenes, and there's another kind of revolution happening here in the beverage space, which is the bioavailability with the application of nanotechnology, and actually very, very small particle size compared to large particle size. So what's happening with that is not just with THC Delta 9, but THCV, with CBD, that consumers are now actually able to feel and understand the effect of these cannabinoids and even the terpenoids, very similar to that of smoking, which kind of is the big differentiator, is the big gap between smoking and consuming an edible. So I think within the beverage space, having nano emulsions and micro emulsions, if somebody has any specific questions, please feel free to ask, like, what is the difference? But in essence, it is the particle size that's the difference. So just diving into the science and new technologies a little bit more, that as the beverage space evolves further, more compounds get introduced, such as more cannabinoids, terpenoids, even certain flavonoids, reducing the particle size of those and putting them in a beverage is leading us to a space where consumers can now finally feel the effects of these items, where it would be very similar to vaping or smoking. So it's a great, great platform for even for people in the medical community, right? Because they can recommend very specific, exact dosages to patients.
Thanks, Jay. And John, I apologize. I see now your hand is up and I just saw your question, but go ahead and speak next.
I had a question for Lisa from an investor standpoint. Maybe you could tell us about your first investment, and then what do you look for in investments when you invest? That'd be great.
My first investment was actually in a bottling and packaging company. I met them at a cannabis show. I knew I wanted to get into the space, but I really was nervous about investing in flower because I wasn't sure what was going to happen regulatory. I wasn't sure what was going to happen with banking. So I met Kush Bottles, who I ended up investing with, and I liked them because they were bottling and packaging, which meant they had no banking issues. They had none of the sort of headaches, but they were already in the market. They were already serving dispensaries. And people thought I was nuts. I made a friends and family investment, but they were neither my friends nor my family. And it worked out really well. They went public. I did extremely well in that investment, and it gave me a little bit more confidence to keep venturing into the space. In terms of what I look for in investments, it's actually really similar to what I would look for in almost any kind of investment. Who's the team, right? Who's the operator? Because yeah, we can all look at the different bud and the different tinctures and the different, like chemists, but ultimately who's going to be able to get this amazing product into the hands of consumers or into a B2B place? So I really look at who are the operators, what is the background, do I have confidence in their ability? Do I feel that there is something untapped? Like I said, I don't usually like to go with the pack, like little kids playing soccer that all follow the same ball and they all sort of run around in like, what's the thing of the month? I really look at, do I see a need for it? Do I see a marketing plan? To Anand's point, are there influencers behind it? When it comes to something like CBD, for example, I think that there's been a lot of great work in educating the public that it is possible to get a lot of the benefits without getting high, right? Without any of I think there's a general understanding of that now, but how do you choose between one CBD brand and another? That comes down to literally the ability to brand something and get it into the minds of the consumer. So I just made an investment in a CBD company called Zone In. Why? They sent me samples. Never underestimate the power of an actual sample. It's good to try a product and decide if you like it. But I also really liked the story of one of the founders who is a football player who had injuries. It really helped him. And he was such a passionate advocate that he got me excited about the brand just from his abilities. So long story short, I look at the plan, I look at the founder, I look at where the market is, if I think there's too much in the space, if it's already too crowded or if it's new. And to be honest, what I'm looking for now is psychedelics. I think that cannabis is a great market, but there's already a lot of attention and investment in the space. And I think the next big thing with all the focus on mental illness is really going to be legal psychedelics. So as an investor, I'm now exploring that realm a little bit more than traditional cannabis plays, just because I feel like there's less of it and there's more of an opportunity to get in early. And I like to be early in things rather than sort of trying to differentiate between multiple crowded spaces. So I hope that wasn't too long of an answer, John. But yeah, I went from a picks and shovels into a cultivation, into a license, so I sort of run the gamut.
Thank you, Lisa. And I'll just note Charles Bronstein, one of my partners, is on, and we'll be connecting with you because he's looking at psychedelics as well. So on that front, in terms of, looking at the investment choices out there, and I just wanted to echo what Lisa said. Most of the challenges of startups are challenges of startups. They're not unique to cannabis. The teams have to figure out how to manage a lot of challenges, and then on top of that, sometimes layered on is regulatory issues and changes that will happen in the federal level and are happening across states. Hopefully, think through the impact and are pro business in general, and kind of take aside some of the past attitudes that governments have had towards cannabis. And also, hopefully, we'll take into account social impact and those causes and make it equitable, which seems to be the theme so far in many states and has been a good development. The other thing I wanted to just throw out there and the audience is welcome to jump in and ask any questions, but I'm just trying to derive from this meeting also themes for future meetings. So please do send your suggestions into the chat. Because those are very helpful in defining our programming. And also, I was called out, as I often am, and it's a very fair call out. There was no minorities on the panel, and I just wanted to point out, and that was from Lauren, and I appreciate that, Lauren. And so our next series, one of the panels will be all minorities, because men or women, because we definitely want to deepen our benches on that front. So
can I just jump in and say this one thing? What I would like to see, though, in the future, it's not going to happen next week or even next month, but one day, just the idea that we don't have to have an all minority panel or an all women's panel, that participation of minority and women in these things is just going to be so commonplace that we don't have to think about making special spaces for these. And I hope that that's something that we can all evolve to at some point.
Absolutely, and that is the goal. But by making it all minority and all women, our bench just deepens, and so that's the purpose of it. It's not to, and this event was not called Women in Cannabis, which most women focus. It is a global outlook by women who are, leaders in the cannabis space from all different angles. So,
and Lauren, we'll definitely we'll get there. We're under inclusive. We need your help, as you know. So that's really a call out to the village.
Absolutely.
I've got a recommendation. I'll send it to you.
Thank you, John, as always. Any questions from the audience? It's completely open. We always run over. So if you're able to stay on, speakers, panelists, I know you're probably got other commitments. So if you're not able to stay on, totally understood, but these discussions definitely run over. So feel free to jump in with any questions anybody might have.
Can you text me, Arnon, so I can connect you with the other potential panelists?
Absolutely.
Yep. Laura, did you have anything?
And John, we have an app too.
Okay, I still figured out how to use that. I got the website going, but I'll work on the app. But
all right.
Well, Laura, I know you've had a background in this. Do you have any thoughts you want to share with the group? We're running overtime here, but it's free form, so. No, okay.
Hey, Anand, Cedric here.
Hey, Cedric, how are you?
I'm well. How are you? Ladies, fantastic panel, very educational. Andrea, question for you. Just a simple, what are you seeing in terms of new formats? The idea of consumer education was kind of repeated throughout. Very much a believer in that as well. But, formats, the ability for consumers to integrate cannabinoids into their routine diet however they like. very early on, we looked at ingredients, sugar, flour, turmeric. What are you seeing in the market, either coming around the corner or existing, that is a little off the beat of what we've seen so far?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, there we go.
When you're talking about sugar and things like that, you mean just like infused like packets that people can add to food?
Yeah, the infused packets, a natural sweetener or syrup. Again, I've seen that type of thing. I'm wondering what else might be out there that, is bubbling.
Sure. Well, I do see, like, along those lines, I see, there's also a big market of people that don't want sugar. When we're talking about health components, we need to make sure that there are like low glycemic options. So I do see like increasingly specialized components when people are looking at that form factor. I definitely see some medical things around sprays that again, these are going to be highly targeted use cases. So I'm not sure how widespread that pickup will be. But I think, along the lines of what Jay said, I think, sublinguals and nanotechnology is having a huge uptick right now. And I think there's going to be, I think edibles and much of the market is going to move in that direction because people do want that quick onset, especially during the day. I think you'll have still like more traditional edibles used for sleep at night because you do want them cycling through the body. So Cedric, I'm not sure if I have a completely new thing that I'm seeing right now, other than I'm seeing, again, like the amount of nanotechnology type of products that are coming across our plate. I mean, it just seems everyone's moving in that direction, from tinctures to gummies to chocolates, all over.
You kind of have to. Like, once the consumer understands that, why would I go back to using something that my body is not able to? Your insight on the beverages was affirming. You kind of hear that, but I'm sure you're running off of data, and that's interesting. And I think a positive for the industry. Thank you for the info, for the answer.
I have a question. Do you all view what you're doing? I'm in the South, so I say all y'all sometimes, but as an impact investment, is that a category that you're staying away from? Or are you owning it? Are you in the middle? Like, how do you view yourself?
I can answer, or
yeah, anybody, yeah.
I consider investing in my company an impact investment, just in terms of how we are specifically positioning ourselves, which again is, at the intersection of purpose and profit. We do considerable givebacks. My background is in the NGO nonprofit sector. I've made a huge leap going in this direction, but I still believe, you can create a better world through cannabis, and that can include for-profit companies. And so we're aiming to consistently be a leader in the space. Again, in my company's women, Latinx, LGBTQ founded, and then we're uplifting a lot of companies with similar makeup. So I think I consider my company to be in the realm of impact investment. Curious what other panelists respond.
Well, thank you.
You answered for all the panelists, Andrew. Thank you.
I think that's true.
Right. Yeah, I'm asking because I don't want to delude myself. So I'm just trying to ask if I'm throwing the label on, or if it's a true label. So thank you. I appreciate that.
I think it's a true label.
Thank you.
One of the things, and John invited me to offer a question. I'm not sure if this is a question for, I think, for any of the panelists. When we think about, maybe it's impact, maybe it's about the diversity of the field. One of the things that we grappled with, and I'm in New Jersey when the laws were being written here, is how do we create access for women and minority-owned businesses, and what does that look like legislatively to sort of move the field that way? And I'm wondering, from the entrepreneur standpoint, or from even the investors, how you see the government, which is regulating this state by state at this point, supporting a broad entry point for entrepreneurs. if you do at all?
I can take this again or someone
I-
else.
I think Andrea, you are one of the few panelists left standing, so
Oh.
you may get a number of questions, and I'll hop in to pretend to be a panelist if needed, if you feel like somebody else should speak. But go ahead.
I mean, hopefully I'm answering this question correctly. You know, I think it's really about like how equity programs are going to be structured. So activists need to be, hopefully their voices are getting heard and included in that. As legalization rolls out in other states, that we are learning from some of the missteps that have happened in earlier states, specifically around equity. There's a lot of repair, restructuring, things going on to make sure that a diversity of populations can have access to entering the space. Going back to John's question around I consider my, impact investment. You need to invest in companies. You know, obviously if you're an investor, you're looking to make money. This isn't a nonprofit, but I 110% believe you can invest in a company that's going to be very successful, give you high value on return, that is creating an equitable industry. And so look, that is where we have a very specific curation thesis. I want to make sure that at minimum 20% of the brands on my platform are BIPOC owned. That should be considered a value add. That a minimum of my brands are 50% women owned. Value add. So these things create the equity and value, and from what we're seeing and our growth is that it is aiding in our development and stickiness and profitability. So I would hope that other people take note and follow that in general, but there has to be, people need to walk the walk. It's great to talk about, I'm here to create an equitable industry. What are you actually doing? What are your commitments? How do you give back? What are your partnerships? And I hope that investors are taking note of that and considering that when they're looking at investing in a company.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I second the walk, Andrea. That's right. Tell them.
I have a question. Is anybody aware of any use of marijuana to restore blindness in diabetic patients?
I'm not aware of it, but I will note this, John. One of the focuses on the series will be to talk about research that is, well formulated. Unfortunately, a lot of the research comes out of Europe and Israel and, Canada, and not the United States, because the United States facilities that do research get swag, basically, really low quality, limited cannabis. I have a brother-in-law who's now a radiologist, but went to Carnegie Mellon and was doing research before joining medical school. And he studied effects of cannabis on mice. And science is only as good as kind of the hypothesis you're trying to work off of. If you're truly practicing science, you come up from observation data with certain hypotheses. You're not, trying to narrow it down so you can just prove some political agenda. But in his case, in his research, he was seeing no real addictive effects of cannabis on these mice. It wasn't a exhaustive study, but they canceled it because they couldn't prove addiction in mice and couldn't therefore publish showing that cannabis is addictive. And so research can be very skewed in certain environments where there's a negative stance from an institutional point of view. In Israel and in Europe, there is high quality research being done on cancer, on a whole host of things, and the proof of that is Epidiolex and CBD and GW Pharma selling for $7 billion plus in terms of when the research and the scalability of a product comes in line. It's a huge application.
Thank you.
Any questions from the audience in case I skipped any in the chat window?
I guess I had a question, a question.
Go for it.
Yeah, I kind of wish that Ann was still on this call, so I guess I could address this to you, Andrea. I guess how you say, I'm one of these people who you could say once us all started happening, had to kind of, you could say, out themselves as someone who was familiar with cannabis before legalization, right? And where I'm directing this is, I think what was really fascinating that I guess wondering if somebody is really working on, this idea of just all of this that existed before legalization, how this is kind of impacting the market. And I think it was just really fascinating, this idea of, you could say, people who were already familiar with it, who think they know about it, but really don't, And so I'm just wondering, Andrea, if anybody, I don't know if you could say cannabis historians, but people that are really trying to, document this history, because somehow I think a lot of this will be important, especially when you talk about this idea of, how to educate existing users, right? And why they should be educated.
Yeah. So I'm going to answer your question in a little bit of a sidetracked way. Again, I'm from the Bay Area. When I think of historical documentation, it's Pride Month. I am a gay lady. So a lot of what I think about in terms of historical and how we got to where we are, to Prop 215, to Prop 64 in California, is looking at, the roots of cannabis legalization in California, which is coming out of the HIV and AIDS community. So I think a lot about the historical context there. So that's just my particular lens. So I know it doesn't 100% address what you're talking to, but I think
all of it would be useful, though. That's like you say. There's a whole arc of history that came before even just the propositions, right, that legalized it. And I think California, in a sense, is unique because you have this proposition. It's you have more of a history of it than we do in other places. But I still think it would be interesting.
Yeah, there's global history,
different.
right? Global history around the world of cannabis being used therapeutically. It's great to pick up books that showcase that. And then in terms of like the current moment, again, I always go back to the 1980s. I also follow a lot of the research coming out of Israel, which they started, the government there started funding research in the 1960s, way ahead of all of us. Very forward thinking. They're ahead of us in like pretty much every area of research. And in fact, the researchers that were pioneering that in the 60s and 70s are still, very active today. So I think there is more I think it's important to bring this context alongside us as we move forward. So to me, I'm someone who, when it's nighttime, I love to pick up a history book and read. So you're getting an answer from a very specific type of human. So
God, us history nerds. Thank God for History Channel, huh? So we don't have to bug our eyeballs out,
Yeah.
But the other reason why, once again, another thing that Ann brought up that I think is really interesting is this idea of the parallels between, the cannabis industry and just the rest of the agriculture industry, which is something kind of you're speaking to, Andrea. I know, for instance, one of the issues in so-called developing nations is, multinationals and big agricultural interests that are coming in and taking, you could say, local approaches and local crops and wanting to, patent them, right? Without giving the, so to speak, credit and remuneration to, the local people who had been using a lot of these things for years. And so I think a lot of this idea of looking at the history of cannabis will also be something to be used when we talk about this idea of, inclusion and, equity and how this industry develops, because a lot of the roots from it come from these, these communities that we're trying to impact with this, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what you're describing and what we're seeing now, unfortunately, this is nothing new with companies coming in.
That's my point. That's why
can we disrupt that cycle? Where can there at minimum be more of a balance and be more equity? And that's where I think, you know, activists and investors need to come together, and that there is a net positive to making sure that happens.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, at the risk of being controversial, because I'm all about trying to find the top tier of whatever we do. And this is taking nothing away from all the things we discussed, but when you talk about, there is a thing you touched on, Lauren, and you want to respect the roots and social equity. But sometimes the founders are not the ones to lead. Sometimes the people that we're fighting for legalization are not necessarily the management class to lead. They're like the founders, and they hand off, because even me, I'm not a founding moment. This is a founding community, and we'll probably operationalize, professionalize, because no one's crazy like me to do this. So I should probably lead the whole for the next 5 years. But what I found is there is a trend already to some of those founders moving back, still holding shares, and then there's a professional class coming in. That's not always the case, but you're going to see that, and then we just got to find that balance. I guess some of the issues you're talking about. So,
well, I mean, and just the other thing of, I guess, and I don't know who had mentioned this, but for instance, you know, we've got African Americans who are, you know, doing MBAs too, and maybe we want to have them say, look, you want to think, here's a way to make the bridge between your skill set, your business aspirations, and what you can do to serve, right?
Well, there are two things there, and we're talking to Charles Way later, former NFL guy. He works with a lot of sports people. And by the way, very poorly advised people. They got the worst advice sometimes. But you didn't see Carlisle Young. He's with Kevin Garnett's family office. So you may not have known that. He was on earlier. I think a lot of them could be brand ambassadors, and they are starting to be, right? And that, you know, they need to be. That's exactly what we're trying to do, is create ways for that community to get involved in a positive way. They don't have to throw all the money at it. Let's do what a lot of good people are doing. But I think your earlier point, would love to get just a mixture of perspectives on everything. That's what, including the, you know, whether it's what we call today minorities is, and people feel free to, if you think that I'm wrong. I'm just trying to figure out how we can back a ton of your companies, and a lot of what we're trying to do is with funds, because the funds see 1,000 deals, but we want accelerators too. They're really all the way through.
I've said this. I'm really looking to brand 361 here, Chicago, as being the conduit for all that kind of stuff, both, you know, connecting what's going on here in Chicago with, you know, the rest of the universe, but also, like you say, here, in between, because really, yeah, I don't want to keep blowing sunshine up to that, but, you know, that's why it's called leadership. And I think that's what we're trying to do here. That's why it's called leadership.
So I was in and out, but I love that. I can just hand this off to you on what were your takeaways from this, including where we're going to go next?
You know, I kept this general on purpose because we could take it in so many directions. But I think some of the threads that emerge, and one of them is just public kind of perception of what's going on. So for the next couple of series, I'd like to focus in on some of those themes, and I'll be kind of sharing a summary of notes from this. But, you know, one of the reasons why influencers are not getting involved and celebrities are not jumping behind the THC part, let's just call it, or the psychoactive part of cannabis, is it's perceived as people smoking joints and bongs, and nobody wants to associate themselves with that. And Martha Stewart's confident enough to do it with a lighter, but you know, most people are not. And so once they start to learn more about how the plant works, how it affects people, because they have no shame in promoting alcohol, right? And so I'm not going to say negative things about alcohol. I have no issues with alcohol. I don't consume it myself personally, but, you know, alcohol is alcohol.
I do. I'm proud to say, well, I try to do it responsibly. But it's true from an impact perspective. It's, you know, my health will be improved if I transition more.
Well, and so
do you want to know the God's honest truth or not? Seriously, 20 plus years ago, we always had said that as the people who, you know, were smoking bongs in high school and college got to the age where they were running these companies and, you know, running some of these government agencies, the change was going to come anyway, right? You know, you look at the so-called opioid crisis. As long as it was poor Black people in the hood who were, you know, using heroin or using this, then it was the approach to it was criminal. When it became that it was like housewives being addicted to stuff that their doctors were prescribing, now all of a sudden it's a health crisis, right? And so a lot of the people who are, like I say, talking about the whole, you know, inclusion equity piece, and that's what they're saying is that, look, you know, 20 years ago, you know, short of 10 years ago, you know, 70% of the people at Cook County Jail were people that are awaiting a trial on a cannabis possession charge, right? And now it's $1 billion industry, right? And so we knew this day was coming at some point, to be honest with you.
And to that point, we've been in some meetings where let's say the established power, they expect it. It's just you know, I was in 2 different meetings where, you know, these are like governors and, you know, and people around them. It's whether it's 2 years or 4 years. The polling supporting it. Some of that polling, you know, probably relates to some things you were talking on. And we're almost, you know, and obviously we're already there in, you know, umpteen states and countries. And
yeah, and I think, but the key is most people, just like they responsibly consume alcohol, maybe during COVID, nobody responsibly consumed alcohol and that changed, but most people, they're going to be microdosers or they're going to be, you know, occasional users. And most people just want to relax and de-stress and get rid of anxiety when they're socializing and at the end of a long day. And so it's all about changing what they know to be the form function of the industry. And I don't think it's for everybody. I don't think cannabis is for everybody. It doesn't need to be. But in understanding and explaining these things, it does make an impact. And so I'd love for us to focus in on some of the science that is presented on this, and you can have discussion around that. Not every, you know, scientific paper is unanimously accepted as law, as we've seen. You know, coffee used to be 1 week really good for you and 1 week really bad a few years back, and now you don't see much news on it, but there was a whole battle for a while in influence about whether coffee is good for you or not, and you know, similar things will happen about cannabis. The other theme I wanted to note is the benefit of this community, and the reason it's called, you know, 361 from it. You've got a globe in your logo, and our Bar Capital Global has launched is because California is on the cutting edge and has a very deep market and legalized market, and, you know, regulation's not perfect by any means, but it's seen a lot of there's just a lot of opportunity there and a lot of competition and innovation. People really need to stand out to survive, and then some do really well. But that handbook and that playbook and that interchange between California, the East Coast, let's say, or the Midwest and East Coast that are lagging behind, but trying to kind of catch up in social and political and all those ways on the cannabis front. And then, you know, Europe, Africa, South America, all these markets are taking note. And I'd love for the community to be able to have somewhat of a playbook and a directory of contacts and ways to communicate, so that you know what the playbook should be in Africa because of the lessons learned in Canada and California and other parts of the US or Europe. And you can skip some of the pitfalls and move this industry forward globally faster. And that's one of our, you know, principles is we hate seeing wasted capital because that can make an industry stall in a very, very bad way. So the more operational experience there is and global interchange there is, the more you know, import export we can do down the line.
And just to that point, I mean, I think the other part, and even what makes even California that much more of an interesting place, besides being 40 million people, is just the fact that it also is the entertainment capital. And the question of, you look at so many, our biggest export is our culture. And when you really think about, even that Mad Men mentality and rebranding this as a social stigma, I mean, that's why, to me, I mean, being in Colorado for the last 5 years and seeing it kind of recreationalized, I mean, the world didn't fall apart. And there have been a lot of people that, from the government and from technology players that consulted with California in terms of, how do you basically, there is a bit of a playbook, because the main thing is they're taking it from what was an illegal industry, $13 billion illegal industry, but obviously there was demand there to make it a $60 billion industry, and much more of a CPG components, where you're talking about the microdosing and really making it as available, and opportunity sets where it's just like having a drink in hand. And we never had the research, and we had the federal funds. And a friend of mine who was over at Tilray, she kind of took a lot of that educational element in terms of educating a lot of groups. And, it's funny. I mean, there's 30 years worth of research out of Israel, and it's a matter of dropping it and educating the community first to educate all the benefits and all the capabilities, but then also to be able to package it in the right ways for the right consumer. I mean, who's the Martha? I mean, is it the soccer mom? Is it the African community, African American community? Is it the after work executive? I mean, whatever it is. I mean, you're really starting that differentiation right now, which I think is exciting.
Well, I was showing you that picture of Katie Loeb. If anyone knows her, Michael Loeb from Priceline founder. Yeah. She threw an event 2 years ago called Pot or Not. It's not like Pot or Not. It's a series. It's or not. Just happened to throw pot on the third time, and that was Fast. I was just showing it. Fast Five Freddy. He did a documentary on the history of all this, and it's there's a lot of systematic racism, right? That is embedded. You can't just, it is what it is. So to make to your point, there's sort of the science topic would be great, and maybe do that before the cultural. I think he would love to show a documentary and do a fireside panel. Then it's come down to criminal justice and all the other pieces, but look, we all have had ancestors that may not have done the things that you can't, choose your parents. You can't, love my parents, but but we can all do better. Let's just focus on that. And
to the people that know, how important is federal legalization and what's going to happen with that? How important is that to the development of the industry, and when is that going to happen, if ever? Or is it really, I guess, I'm kind of thrown out there. Is it that important right at this very stage?
I'll let you take that one, Andrea.
I have so many thoughts, and the thought of a legacy operator like myself may very much differ from someone who's newer coming in. So my take, I don't think we're going to see it under Biden. He's one of the architects of the war on drugs. If you just Google Biden firing staffers, he fired staffers for the cannabis usage. You've seen high-level people in his administration walk back their thoughts. So I think we're going to see, some descheduling, continued efforts around decriminalization, expungement, things like that. So you're going to see movements, but do I think it's going to be federally legal in this administration? I do not. Maybe I'll be proven wrong, but I really highly doubt it, even if it passes under Biden in his first term, which hopefully will be the first of two. It's going to be a while before all this regulation is going to come down, and I don't believe you're going to see commerce across state lines. So there will be a lot to follow.
That would seem to be the real big one. And how does that affect your prospects, or just the prospects for your company or your industry?
Sure. So, here's the deal, again, speaking as a legacy operator, what we want is banking, lines of credit, loans. We're moving there. Now you can have fully compliant bank accounts in a way you couldn't even have 3 years ago. And also the rates for said bank accounts are going down. So the movement in the right direction is happening. Many individuals like myself might see their exit of like, hey, I want to exit in 3 to 5 years and get picked up by a Fortune 500 company. A lot of times I think when investors are talking to entrepreneurs, that's the answer you'll get when talking about an exit. The truth is this industry is consolidating fast. People are going to take exits earlier. I am looking at exits early, like things are moving. So people get excited about, acquisition, entrepreneurs get excited about acquisition opportunities, but it's not something you can count on at this point. So it's something to reach for. It might happen, but it's completely unknown. What people need to focus on is building their business, building their brand, because opportunities are going to happen, but it might be from, more aggressive MSO consolidation rather than Fortune 500 companies and coming in and picking us up.
Yeah, I'll just comment on.
Different opinions.
Totally agree on the safe banking part too. I think the banking part, I would say safe banking to me is the biggest domino if it's done properly and they don't screw it up. Like I'm a cynic when it comes to politicians. I just kind of am. But if they do that properly, then money will talk, and these banks will see the opportunity for growing business from an industry that, despite high taxation and all of the roadblocks that still exist, that's going to happen. And on Biden, I'll just say this: politicians, they might have their personal beliefs and they might be religious and all of those things, but when movements happen, they happen, and they read that and they want to leave a legacy on the right side of kind of history. And if the public opinion shifts and everybody wants legalization in a very strongly voiced way, similar with kind of gay marriage when it took place, Obama wasn't really for it, and then it happened, quite quickly when the tipping point hit politically. So I'll just note that.
What I'd love to hear is it is a matter of when, whether it's 2, 4, 5, 6 years. What happens then? So you can say what happens with safe banking done right. What happens with legalization done right? I mean, what happens to? We're still a sliver of the total market. Does that step change off of that? Does the legal market become so much more efficient and capitalized that they take market share?
I think the biggest change will be. I'm no friends to the drug cartels, but I'll use them as an example again. They are very efficient in business. They know what they're doing. They've done it a long time. And the switch will come when drug cartels realize that their black market activity is more expensive than just paying some taxes and flipping the switch and starting to change some of their operations to the white market. And it's going to happen in Mexico.
Do you really think that these guys are going to jump into it?
I think at some point they will, yes, because what they're doing is paying off the military in Mexico, and instead they're going to pay taxes of pretty much the same amount, and they will have federal protection because right now.
All right, well, let's have the discussion. Let's bring the groups together. Let's talk about science. Let's talk about culture, and let's talk about.
No, I suggested that to Anand. Literally, if you want to get some guys on here that maybe are like, quote, in the gray market, I'm literally envisioning somebody sitting in a darkened room with an altered voice,
I mean,
we could think about it. I don't. Yeah, I'm really trying to. I mean, why not?
And I told Lauren that I get to dress up as Larry King, so it's a very provocative session.
So just to put a couple cents in here, there is some geopolitical concerns that you have to be aware of in that area, and especially what Anand's talking about is the different cartels that do have control of those markets and transitioning to a more lucrative market that makes sense. But they have to replace that money somehow. Otherwise, there's going to be conflict at some.
Well, there are other drugs and arrows in their quivers.
Yeah, well, there's other also things at play in Mexico that I'm aware of that replacing businesses with other lucrative businesses that give them legitimacy on the world stage. So
Are you kidding? The market for counterfeit cosmetics in Europe is way bigger than the cannabis market at this point. They got a lot of other places where they can go with that.
well, sure. I mean, we're amongst the big market shift in a lot of different areas, and with the pandemic on top of that, I mean, there's a lot of things that are at play here. So, you know, it's going to be interesting in the next 10 years to see what happens.
But is this also a way of cleaning their money as well? I mean,
Sure.
look at some of the biggest fortunes that were created from the Kennedys and everything from bootlegging. And if you can clean the money and repurpose it.
That's my point right there. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that's the goal for, I think, you know, behind the scenes, you know, I think governments are always trying to get people out of the criminal side and bring them into the more legitimate side. That's the whole, you know, as things go on. But, you know, there are things at play that I'm aware of where, you know, there's huge mines in Mexico that the cartels are thinking of, or I don't know if they've already done it, but that are purchasing, and it's replacing a large amount of money because they're losing money in other areas. So there's a lot of things that are happening in that area.
But then this also brings up the really uncomfortable conversation of the people who have vested interest in keeping it illegal and what kind of pressure they're going to put on all of this.
Yeah, well, one of the biggest competitors to the legal cannabis space is the illegal cannabis space in terms of pricing and quality. So, you know, and Mexico, if the government there really wants to have a lively cannabis legal industry, who are they going to turn to for that? It's going to be the cartels, because nobody else is going to know how to grow it, how to package it, how to distribute it as well. So there's naturally just going to be an influence there. And I think the politicians will still get paid off one way or the other. So for them, it doesn't really change the dynamics too much. But you know, a lot of the laundering will go from their heroin business, and they can wash it through their cannabis business on the legal side. They're going to be all about it. So
I have a comment on that, and sorry, I am chewing off camera because I'm hungry.
You're actually chewing on camera, Andrea.
I am. Yeah, I'm bringing it forward.
Sorry.
What you're saying, Anand, brings up an important point for me. And again, like most operators, is for us to succeed and for people to be able to come in out of the gray market into the legal market, we need to not be taxed out of existence. I mean, that is something that really needs to get fixed. It's all of these taxes, you know, doesn't really help. You know, you can get someone, you know, turned on to cannabis now because it's more accessible, but they're also going to be less afraid to buy on the gray market because there's going to be less consequences in doing so. So if government—
The Chicago police have already announced that if you are, you know, stopped with a nominal amount, they're not going to ask you what the source was. No. And so, you know, we've already seen that there really hasn't been much of a dent in the illegal market. And a lot of that has to do with taxes. I'm going to tell you the truth.
Well, it's
on the street, you're talking anywhere from, let's say, $6 to $11 a gram. The shops, you're talking starting at 15, going up sometimes to $22 a gram. And there's a lot of people that just say, hey, look, it's not, you know, now that I'm not at risk of going to jail for it, what's the point? That was the whole reason. You know, they're not as into some of the things that you and Ann were talking about in terms of the, you know, quality control and stuff like that. It's not illegal anymore. And that's the main thing. And I'm not willing to spend twice as much for that.
Lauren, let her speak.
It's short-sighted. It's incredibly short-sighted on the governments. It's like the cities and state, they want/need our money. They want our tax dollars, but taxing us so high out of the gate makes it hard for companies to succeed. I mean, it just does not make sense. And then they're trying to up the taxes because not as many businesses have gotten as far along, when really it needs to go the opposite direction and make it easier for a business to succeed and thus give you our tax dollars. You know, people that are in the legal space, we're happy to pay taxes. I want to sleep well at night. You know, I want all the solutions that allow me to succeed well. I've taken enough risk to be here, as well as any other legacy operator. So this is something that really needs to get addressed for the legal market to achieve its full potential.
The other area that there's a leg up for the legal market versus illegal is there's no cartels innovating on beverages and tinctures and new consumables, edibles. You know, in the large part, there's definitely illegal edibles you can get too, but they're not really creating any brands other than names of strains. You know, you can buy your Bubba Kush in the black market and you'll get something completely different in the white market for that. And nobody cares in terms of the current consumer base. But as new markets open up, as far as new consumers opening up that want to microdose or are in their 40s or 50s and they're very careful about what they're putting in their body because their bodies are changing, they're not gonna call up their drug dealer. They're gonna look to find dispensaries and medical licenses, and you know, once they are getting educated, they're gonna seek that out. So the cartels have a certain part of the population kind of locked down, and they will have that maybe locked down for some time. But a lot of the new people entering the space, they're gonna go. They left the space or they never tried the space because of the illegality of it. So they're gonna look for the legality as long as the pricing makes sense. And part of the reason the pricing is higher is taxation and lack of supply chain.
I think there's a lot of potential for this idea of educating and making customers like more, you know, sophisticated. I put that comment in the chat. I already see, you know, you could say folks that are talking about this idea of the quality of the experience as opposed to just, you know, how stoned I can get. That's already even, you know, kind of started to seep in. And, you know, just this idea of, like you say, being able to, like, you know, shop different dispensaries. I think this idea, one other thing that struck out to me was this idea of speed and how that's kind of killing the experience. Right. I think that, but yeah, just this idea of educating the existing consumers, I think has a lot of potential.
So, Anna, I apologize. I actually need to shift gears.
Yeah.
We'll probably have.
I didn't get to thank all the panelists earlier, but it was a great session. So, and thank you to the audience.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Really, I'm telling you, this is you guys are on to something here. Really, I'm telling you. 361. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you. Yes, thanks, Andrea. Nice to meet you here.
Thanks for having me. I had a lot of fun.
We're just getting started, Andrea. So this is round one.
Round one. All right, I'm into it. Thank
you, everyone. See everybody in 2 weeks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.